Erev Tov. We continue our discussion of key halachic issues that will arise this Purim. Bezrat Hashem, things are opening up, and we're still exercising caution. We're still being careful. There are still guidelines. But please God, everybody will be able to participate in the mitzvah of listening to Parshat Zachor this coming Shabbat. However, for those who may not be able to make it, for those who are in bidud, for those who are infected, for those who are still being very cautious, we're going to talk about different options available so that everyone in our community can participate in this mitzvah this coming Shabbat. What is Parshat Zachor? What is this about? There are indeed 3 mitzvot in the Torah which teach us about how we're supposed to engage with Amalek. Number 1, Zachor et asher asalacha Amalek. Remember what Amalek did. Number 2, lo tishkach. Don't forget what they did. And number 3, lahachrit et zecher Amalek. To destroy, to eradicate Amalek. It's an interesting theological discussion about how we could be commanded to do something which raises some ethical questions. We're going to put that aside, but it's an important question. Those are the 3 mitzvot. Now, according to the Pshat, if you just look at the Torah, and these psukim come from Parashat Ki Teitzei, which we normally read in the summer on Shabbat, the mitzvah doesn't have to take place at a particular point in time, certainly not this particular Shabbat. It seems like this is a mitzvah which is applicable to men and to women. And all it's about is about remembering. It's a psychological or a mental exercise to remember what Amalek did. It doesn't necessarily have to do with reading any particular text. However, the Sefer HaChinuch tells us that Chazal decided to take this mitzvah, which is a mitzvah of remembering, it's a mental mitzvah, and to turn it into a kriya, and to turn it into, we perform this mitzvah by remembering, by reading a parasha in the Torah. We read Parshat Zachor. Why now? Dafka, the week before Purim, because we know that Haman was a descendant of Amalek, Haman Ha'agagi, and fighting against Haman, remembering what Haman did, is a continuation of an extension of the mitzvah of remembering what Amalek did to us. And indeed, the Baalei Tosafot argue in Masachet Brachot that by reading Parashat Zachor, we are fulfilling a mitzvat aseh midoraita of Zachor et asher asalacha Amalek. This is an opinion quoted in the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Taf Reish Pehei Yesh Omrim. There's a mitzvah to read Parshat Zachor to fulfill this mitzvah. And the Mishnah Berurah points out that it's more important to have a minyan and to have a community to read Parshat Zachor than it is to have Megillah with a minyan and bitzibor. So that's how important this mitzvah is. Do women have an obligation to listen to Parashat Zachor? Interesting debate between the Sefer HaChinuch and the Minchat Chinuch, a commentator on the Sefer HaChinuch. The Sefer HaChinuch says women do not have an obligation. Why? Because the obligation to remember is linked to the obligation to fight against Amalek. And women do not participate in war generally. That's his view. And therefore, women do not have an obligation to remember this mitzvah. And by extension, no obligation to listen to Parashat Zachor. However, the Minchat Chinuch argues on this interpretation and brings a number of arguments why women are commanded to fulfill this mitzvah. Number 1, even if women are not fighting in battle, they are still helping in the war. They help in the war effort, and that's part of the war. Number 2, if there is a milchamet mitzvah, afilu kala michupata, even a woman, leaves her bride room to join against the war. If it's a milchama of necessity, and fighting Amalek is considered a milchama of necessity or a Torah obligation. Number 3, if you think about it, this is a mitzvah which is not time-bound. There's no specific time that you have to do this. It's a mitzvah t'midit. It always applies. Every point of the year, at some point of the year, you have to remember Amalek. And therefore, because it's not time-bound, women are obligated in this mitzvah, just like men are. And so these are 3 different reasons why the Minchat Chinuch says that women are obligated like men. And practically, we encourage women to come and listen to Parshat Zachor just like men. And this is the reason why this year, as we have done for many years in the past, we will have a reading right from Maftir, right at the end of Kriyat HaTorah. This will be outside in the shul. We will also have a reading after Tefillah is over, and we'll have another reading connected to Mincha, and in all the Park Minyanim, connected to our community, we will have readings as well so that everybody can fulfill this mitzvah according to the health regulations. If, for whatever reason, you cannot make it to shul, to hear Parshat Zachor, you have a number of options which are sort of plan B. Those options are, number 1, The Magen Avraham says, or Avraham Gombiner, commentator on the Shulchan Aruch, says, well, you could rely on the Kriyat HaTorah from Purim itself. On Purim day, we read Vayavo Amalek. We'll read it on this next Friday, which relates the war that we had with Amalek in the desert. It doesn't say the commandment to fight and to remember Amalek. It just mentions that war. And the Magen Avraham says you could fulfill the mitzvah of Zechir ad Amalek by reading this parasha. The Mishnah Berurah Siman Tafresh Pei Hey Seif Yud Tet Zayin says this doesn't make sense because Vayavo Amalek is talking about the war, but not the obligation to remember Amalek. He doesn't think this is the ideal way to do it. Better than that is for a person to pick up a chumash on Shabbat Parshat Zachor, this coming Shabbat, open the chumash and read the psukim in Parshat Ki Teitzei. A third option, mentioned by the Chatam Sofer, is later on in the year when we read Parshat Ki Teitzei in the summer, to have kavanah, to fulfill the mitzvah of Parshat Zachor. At that point in time, we'll be reading it biminyan with the whole community, and you can have kavanah to fulfill the mitzvah then. And of course, one can choose to do a number of these options. Rav Avad Yosef writes explicitly, the best thing to do if you cannot make it to shul is both to read it from a chumash, this coming Shabbat, and then Parashat Ki Teitzei, to remember to fulfill the mitzvah. Be'ezrat Hashem, all of us will be able to fulfill this mitzvah according to the health regulations, especially for those who have had 2 vaccines and have waited 7 days and beyond that. One should, and again, everyone needs to make their own decisions, but one could feel comfortable, I think, standing in the rechava of the Beit Knesset to come listen to this mitzvah, if you're on a walk, whatever it is. And Be'ezrat Hashem, we should fulfill this mitzvah properly within the health regulations, and this should be a celebratory Purim for all of us. Kol Tuv, Erev Tov.